The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live for this very special episode. We're doing a special Q&A with Dr. Jed Baker. I'm going to let him come in here in just a second, but I just want to take a second and say, look, it doesn't get better than this. Here at the Autism Network, when we talk about what we want to do shows that answer people's questions, that are pivotal, that have wonderful experts, when you think about that yesterday you had the opportunity to ask Dr. 𝗔𝗕𝗓𝗂𝗧 questions of any nature, and today you have the ability to ask Dr. Jed Baker questions, I can't do better than this, you guys. This is it. It doesn't happen better than this, and back-to-back, amazing. If you watched last Wednesday, we had Dr. Baker on, and I had said to you guys, you know, he's in my top 3 all-time guests. And he said, I'd love to come back for a Q&A, and I went, oh, I'm gonna ask you, and then look, here we are a week later, and he was able to do it, and I was thrilled that he could do it. So right now we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other sites, and our fabulous Traven is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect with this live show. We know that a lot of you, many more of you, will watch it recorded later on. Some of you have written in questions ahead of time. I want to say to you that I hope that if you have questions during the show that you'll write them in. There's lots of different ways that you can write into the show. My favorite is if you just email me, Shannon at autism-live.com. I'm going to say that again many times throughout the show, so don't panic about that. But if you're watching live, there are myriads of ways that you can be talking with me right now, and more importantly, with Dr. Jed Baker. So Traven is running through some of those on the screen. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. And those are the easiest ways that you can be writing into the live show, because if you just write in on that platform, if you're watching on that platform, you just write in right there, and it shows up magically right here on my screen, and Dr. Baker can see it as well. And we will take those questions as they come in. But the show will podcast later on today, and it'll be available anywhere that you get a download of a podcast for free. We aren't on the subscribe ones because part of my mission here over the last 13 years is that this be a free platform to you. We've had many different people come in and go, you know, if you just charge them X, Y, and Z, and we really, I understand that, and we have to keep the lights running, but we don't want to pass the cost on to you, because I know that some of you, like, you need the information and that you don't have money in the couch cushions that you could spare right now, and I want you to use that for yourself and for your kiddos. I will tell you that the podcast, we started having advertisements on the podcast because we do have to keep the lights on, and it's important that I'm honest with you guys about that, and I hope that you'll support our advertisers on the podcast. If you are somebody, though, that you're like, listen, I can afford a small amount every month, I don't want the ads, I would enjoy it so much more without the ads, I want to let you know that now, for the first time, we have made that available because you guys asked for it. If you want something, ask for it. We'll find the way to make it happen. So you can go to glow.fm/autismlive. That's glow, GLOW.F as in Frank and M as in Mary. And then it's / and Autism Live. If you go there, there is a place where it's right there, you can see, and you can sign up for the podcast. It's $5 a month to get it with no ads. If you want to pay for a year in advance, you get a discount because they charge us every time they process your credit card, and so we pass that savings on to you. If we don't need to charge you, we're not going to charge you for that. So please feel free to do that if you are hankering for it without advertisements for the podcast. If you don't mind it, enjoy and there it is on the screen for you, glow.fm/autismlive. If you don't mind the advertisements, and I hope that you don't, then we are so happy to provide this to you free, because that is super important to us. So I want to bring Dr. Baker in. What an amazing guy. And, you know, every time I have had the opportunity to hear him speak or have the opportunity to interview him, he doesn't disappoint. You know what? They say, don't meet your heroes because it'll disappoint you. No, I disagree. And Dr. Baker is a great case in point. For those of you who weren't watching last week, let me tell you a little bit about him. He is the director of the Social Skills Training Project. It's an organization serving the autism community. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa from SUNY Binghamton and went on to receive the Presidential Fellowship from SUNY Albany, where he completed his doctorate in clinical psychology. He writes, lectures, and provides training internationally on topics of social skills training and managing challenging behaviors. He is an award-winning author. In fact, he wrote the definitive book, Social Skills Training, which you can see there on the screen, which currently the 20th anniversary edition is out, and it's a must-have. Even if you have the other one, there's changes, you got to have it. But he's written so many books, you guys. Preparing for Life, the complete handbook for the transition to adulthood with those with autism and Asperger's syndrome, the Social Skills Picture Book, the No More Meltdowns. Oh, what a great book everybody needs to have. These are all available. You can go to it's FHAutism.com, futurehorizons.com. But it's FH Autism, but the FH stands for Future Horizons, or you can get them easily on Amazon, and they are low cost, you guys, big impact, low cost books. One of my favorites, though, of all time that I recommend to everybody, everywhere, you've heard me talk about it here before on the show, Overcoming Anxiety in Children and Teens. I think it's a must to have in your house. If you have anyone that you love on the autism spectrum, or you yourself are on the spectrum, get that book. The new one that we talked about last week that I have ordered, No More Victims, Protecting Those with Autism from Cyberbullying, Internet Predators, and Scams. Isn't that something we need to have in our homes? And not just on the bookshelf, but like by the bedside. So he's here today, and he is prepared to just answer your questions. Let's welcome him back to the show. Dr. Baker, thanks for so much for coming back.
And thank you for all your kind words. I hope not to disappoint.
You won't.
I will have an answer for everyone's questions. I just can't guarantee it's the right answer, but I'll have an answer.
All right. And we always give a disclaimer when we're asking experts to give questions that we want you to write in with as much information as possible, but understand that Dr. Baker is going to give you information based on what you tell him, and he does not have eyes on the situation. So it's incumbent upon you to listen to what Dr. Baker has to say, and he's going to give you some wonderful insights, but you can't give individual specific advice in this format. Would you say that's true, Dr. Baker?
Right. It's a consult. I can give you my thoughts about the general issues we're bringing up, but without knowing the particular individual that we're talking about, and without all the background information, it's not the same as sort of ongoing therapy. But certainly, I always have an opinion and always have some thoughts. Like I said, it may not always be exactly the right one, but hopefully it'll be useful tools.
I have never heard you say anything that wasn't useful, so absolutely amazing. So we're going to start with a question that came in after we announced that you were going to be doing this. Somebody wrote in and said, my son is 14 and he has no friends. This breaks my heart. He says he doesn't want friends, but I think this is because he has been bullied, and his assumption is that that is what a friend does. I see that he is depressed, but I don't know what to do to help him. He would rather stay at home and play video games. He does not play games with other people, only by himself. He used to play Minecraft, but a quote-unquote friend burned down his house in the game. We need to specify that. Now he won't play anything that involves other players. So talk to us, Dr. Baker, because this is a sad state of affairs.
Well, and not entirely uncommon for a lot of my clientele who've had a rough time socially. There's a fair amount to unpack there. So one of the things Mom alludes to is maybe a past bullying trauma, or maybe several bullying traumas. When you have trauma, I think it's really important to first really validate people's feelings about how it makes sense that they're having this reaction and having these worries and feelings. Like it makes sense that he's worried that people will bully him. Of course, if people have done that in the past, it was a trauma. So now your brain is hypervigilant for that. And you're always looking out for that. Our brains are really good at looking out for danger, right? So we want to validate that so he doesn't feel like he's, being dismissed. Oh, don't worry about that. Oh, come on, this person's nice. What? So let's do that first. And then when you have trauma, what's important to do then, after we sort of validate people's feelings, is to sort of differentiate between now and then. Like, yes, that happened then, and so it totally makes sense that you're worried it could happen again. But then we begin to maybe differentiate for him that not everybody is going to be a bully. And how would we know? What are the signs? So that we're not just telling him willy-nilly to sort of start socializing and talking to people and trying to befriend people, but we're validating his legitimate concern. And then, so how do we know, what are the signs that someone could be a friendly person? And so when you're interacting with people on the internet, or you're interacting with people in person, the first thing most of us do is we just sit back and observe. How does this person interact with other people? Are they nice in their comments to other people, or is this a person who trashes other people online? Maybe that's not somebody then we want to interact with. Maybe that is someone who could bully me again. So I think we want to validate for him that there are people who might bully, but let's look for the signs of people who seem not to do that. So what we're starting to talk about is like gradual exposure, gradually facing your fear. So the first step is don't talk to people, just observe, just watch, see what they're like. And then we can maybe think about, well, who seems friendly and how would we approach that person? What would maybe we comment positively on something that they post online, or a game that they're playing, So that's one issue, the trauma issue. The other issue is like lots of folks often on the spectrum seem less motivated to interact with people socially and to make friends. And I think part of that is because there's often a history where they've been sort of forced to do things they're not that interested in. It's not their passion. So we have to pursue intrinsic pleasures. If this kid still likes Minecraft and likes some other video games, that's a place to meet people. We all meet people because of our shared interests. So we would have to, once we sort of help him not overgeneralize his fear of all people, but sort of see that some people could be friendly, where are we going to find those people? Well, let's find those people in the areas that you have shared interests, whether it's video game chats or Japanese anime or other kinds of areas that, where you share an interest. And if it's a school, schools, I used to be, I guess in my culture, we call it a yenta, a matchmaker. And I would think about, how do I group kids with like interests in schools? And rather doing a social skill group, I would rather do a theme-based group, a film club, a book club, a Japanese anime club, a Magic the Gathering club, a Pokemon club, or something based on people's interests, and then bringing people together around that, I think makes socializing more fun. It's an area they know about. So those are some of the things I would think about, in sort of helping this young man. I think also just anytime you start therapy with someone, it's really good to, especially when someone's depressed, like Mom says about this 14-year-old, just really to review that individual's personal strengths and talents. And the areas that they're interested in, those are talents. Because whatever that kid is interested in, chances are he knows a lot about that subject, and he is developing some expertise in that area. And we want to sort of help him have an optimistic sense of himself that, those areas of expertise are things that, are going to take him places in life. And so we want to build his self-esteem too, that he's a person who could in fact be quite likable and have a lot to offer the world. So those are my initial thoughts for this young man.
I think that's an amazing start and a toolbox for this mom, and such vital information for all of us. So thank you for all of that. It brings up so many questions, and my brain is a fuzz right now with so many different questions. But you know, if somebody is in the New Jersey area, they can come to you, correct? They could sign up and they could talk a little bit about the services that you provide and
Oh,
where you provide them.
yeah.
Because if somebody wants to come to you, they're saying, "Oh, you know, you sound great. I'd like to come to you." Tell them what, how,
Well,
but and then
sure,
then let's talk about if they're not near you, some of the different like different types of things that you would recommend.
sure. Well, for people in the state of so I'm licensed in New Jersey, and so are the people who work in my practice. So there's not just me, it's about, 10 or 11 of us in my practice. And the reason we have many of us is because if we run social kinds of groups, group therapy, and we do individual and family and school consults too, and school in services, and employment in services and things like that. But the reason there's many of us in the practice is because you want to be able to sort of do some matchmaking if you're doing groups, and one person can't necessarily have a group for 4-year-olds and a group for 40-year-olds and a group for 94-year-olds. But if you have 10 people in the practice, you can certainly have enough groups going on that we can maybe find a match for people and group people together that might have similar interests and a similar style. So I'm in Springfield, New Jersey. Um, we also have some of our clinicians who have offices in Westfield and in Madison and different parts of New Jersey. Um, I also consult at times with people out of state or even out of the country. So I'm not licensed to do ongoing therapy, but certainly could give my thoughts and advice about a particular situation. Just couldn't do sort of ongoing therapy out of state. Although that can change. There's reciprocity between some of the states if you apply for that. Um, so people can certainly access us through socialskillstrainingproject.com. That's socialskillstrainingproject.com. And if you forget that because it's long, my name, Jed, J-E-D, jedbaker.com, will take you to the same website. There's a tab on the website, How to Become a Client, where we just ask for some brief, basic information so we can reach out to you and see about scheduling, service to try to meet your needs. Generally, there's not such a wait list for individual therapy. There is sometimes a wait list for group because, we're trying to find the right group that will meet that individual's needs. And so sometimes you have to kind of wait for that to happen.
So let's say that I'm a mom in Missouri. I'm not in New Jersey. I'm not where you're at. Do I still go to your website and see if I can have a consult with you, because then you'll help me to figure out what to go to next? Or are there other places that you recommend that are in other places? What if I do if I'm in Missouri?
Yeah. So you should buy up land because taxes are so much better in Missouri than in New Jersey. That's the first thing you
Yes,
should
but
do.
there's all the tornadoes and the heat
Well,
and the
we have them here
humidity.
too. We have them here in New Jersey too. In
Okay.
fact, right from my house, about 800 feet, we lost a house 2 years
Oh,
ago.
no.
But nevertheless, you can certainly consult with me, if need be. But every state has, the services, and I find that the best place I think that families find services is through parent organizations,
Mm.
because these parent organizations, they have direct experience with the service providers in their area, and parents are really good at saying, hey, this person was so helpful and really useful, these are people you should see. I think those sort of grassroots parent organizations are often the best referral sources. That being said, what is I'm blocking on the name, but it's the national sort of autism website, started by NBC exec. You know what I'm talking about?
Autism Speaks.
Yeah, Autism Speaks has a nice website that has services listed state by state. And that's not a bad place to start as well. So it kind of depends on what people want. But, the local Autism Society of America chapters
Uh-huh.
are often really good places. For people with ADHD, the 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗓𝗔, 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗓𝗔 parent organizations are also good places. And then there are sort of other sort of national autism organizations local to that area. And, you can, often they have really good referral information. Now, some people are calling because, their kids are getting older, they're young adults, and they need to apply for things like Division of Vocational Rehab. They need help getting a job. So there are government websites, and Autism Speaks can help you navigate that too, their website. But, so Division of Vocational Rehab is one that often kids, when they're about to graduate, you want to start applying for that well before they graduate, so that when they do graduate, they could become eligible for things like a job coach and job training. You may have an individual with a more profound autism diagnosis, and they're going to be eligible for the Department of Developmental Disabilities funding, DDD funding, which might help them get on wait lists for residential settings to live, and get a stipend that are money that can be used for various services, including services like ours, or other kind of services that might include job training or recreational activities and socialization activities. There may be people, because of their disability, then that are eligible for Social Security benefits. And so you can apply on the government websites for that. And so you can go directly to the government websites for Department of Developmental Disability, Social Security, or Department of Vocational Rehab, DVR. But if you forget all that, the Autism Speaks website, I think, is a pretty good navigational tool to get you to some of those places.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go to someone who's an adult who's written in and said, I'm 27 and I'm neurodivergent. I have a job that I'm good at. I live alone. I have friends that I go out with for a beer like once a month at a sports bar. I don't ever meet women. There are none at work, and the only women at the sports bar are waitresses, and I have asked them out, and they all said no. I know that I'm awkward, especially in conversations, especially around women. I would like to date, get married, and have kids, but I don't think that will ever happen. I know something has to change, but I don't know what to do. And I have to say, this question breaks my heart, because when I read this question, first of all, I think it's very eloquent. They paint a very clear picture, and they clearly have the ability. I mean, talk about the self-awareness that is in this, that when I think about most 27-year-olds that, maybe don't, male or female, don't have this much self-awareness, and yet they're having trouble connecting that to a partner. And I see this time and time again. So what do you want to say about this, Dr. Baker? Tear this down for us.
Well, I see it a lot too. Sometimes I wish I ran a dating site more than
Me too.
That being said, I have done some matchmaking in the past. I mean,
there's the Yenta.
Just putting people together, not saying you should date, just putting people in the same group sometimes who I think would get along. But that being said, in the social skill training book, we have a whole section on dating. And one of the first things that we look at is like, where do you meet people to date? One of the challenges is asking people out at a restaurant, your waitress. That's not a great place to start, because the waitress is at a job, and she has to be friendly to you because that's her job. That doesn't mean she wants to date you. And so this is not a pool of people necessarily who are interested in dating. They're interested in getting a paycheck and serving you a meal. So that might not be the best person to be asking out, but it happens to be where this gentleman, goes. If he is going to a bar, it's the people sitting up at the bar alone, having a drink, who might be saying, I'm interested in meeting people if I'm here alone and having a drink up at the bar. But probably the better place for most of my clientele to meet people is online, on dating websites. And there's a larger pool of people. And the one good thing about dating websites is everybody on the website sort of expects you to ask them out. They're not going to be offended or threatened by that. Whereas if you ask the waitress out, or you see somebody that you're attracted to walking down the street and you go up and randomly ask them out, that can be perceived as creepy or threatening because that's not what they were there for. So I list a bunch of different websites. Now there are mainstream websites like Match.com and Plenty of Fish and things like that. And some of them have sort of subcategories of people who are shy or have anxiety issues. But there are also more specialized websites specifically for people with autism. So the advantage is if you're on the spectrum, they're on the spectrum too. They don't have an issue with that. The disadvantage is there are probably less people on that website, and there might be a lot more men than women on those websites, potentially. So I think it's good to sort of sign up for a variety of these websites, but with a friend or a trusted mentor who can help guide you when you're on those websites, help you make a profile that's appropriate. So I think that's the best place to meet people. Now, I think you have to adjust your expectations too, because it's a numbers game, and not everybody loves math, but here's how it works. Here's how probability works. If I have a bag of marbles and I've got one blue marble in a bag with the rest are all orange marbles, and I got two bags just like that, and from each bag I keep pulling out marbles, what's the chance of getting those two blue marbles? You know, the reason I'm saying that is if you like 1 in 10 profiles you see on a dating website, and the woman that you're hoping to date, she likes 1 in 10 people that she sees in terms of the profiles, the chances of you finding each other are 1 in 100. You got to go through 100 people before you get that match. You multiply 1/10 by 1/10. Sorry for the math, but my point in doing this is saying this. You got to go through a lot of people on these dating websites before there's reciprocity, before you find someone that you kind of find attractive and they find you attractive back. Your odds get better if you like more than 1 in 10 people. If you like every profile you see, you've just increased your odds quite a bit. One of the challenges that I see sometimes with my clientele with autism is something that Larry David once said. He said on he's the guy from Curb Your Enthusiasm. He said that at one point early in his career, he didn't have a lot to offer women when he dated. He didn't have a job yet, and he wasn't working, and he didn't feel like he was particularly physically attractive so much, but he was incredibly picky about the women he dated. They had to all look like supermodels. Well, that limited who he was going to date, right? And so I think that if we can be a little bit more open-minded about the people we want to date and less sort of narrow, then it opens up the possibilities. So that's the start. And what do you do on these dating websites? Well, what do you do when you meet people in general? You say positive things. So when you're on the internet, you comment positively on somebody's profile. You comment positively on their likes and their interests. You edit and don't say how you hate something that they like, because that's going to disconnect you, right? So you're looking for some commonality and commenting positively on that. You're looking for those common interests that might be a reason for you to go out together to do that common interest together, right? You want to make a good first impression. How do you make a good impression? There's do's and don'ts. One of the issues that I see happens quite frequently with some of my clients on the spectrum, and this is biased, but it tends to be the case. A lot of the guys that I work with bring up sex way too early and terrify the potential person that they want to date. And so we don't talk about sex, in our initial chats online. We don't bring that up until much later, or we wait for the woman to bring it up. Okay, that's intimidating. It's scary. Then women will think that you're just interested in sex and not interested in them. So that's a don't. But then there's a lot of do's too, which is to compliment somebody on their personality and their choice of restaurant, etc. So there are things we can do to make a good impression. And then there's sort of rules about intimacy, but this guy just wants to meet people first. So I think, opening up that sort of internet world is the better place to do that. Now, there are other places too, where you can befriend people first and then see if you want to date. And those are sort of going to theme-based groups of like-minded people. So maybe he would join a group. I'm not sure what his interests are, but if he was, I have a couple of guys I know who love, like, the Renaissance. So they go to the Renaissance fairs and they meet other people who are into that, and then there's the furry community and the cosplay community where people are interested in having an avatar and an anthropomorphized character, and that's a place where you can meet people. So going to places where people have similar interests gives you something to talk about, a reason to be friends first, and then one can figure out if they're single and open to dating.
Do you feel, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that at my age, and I have a 20-year-old son, so people my age, I never was on a dating app. I had to have somebody explain to me what a DM was.
Me too, Shannon.
Right.
I was not either.
And I keep hearing, I met somebody because I slid into their DMs. And I finally said to a friend who was, significantly younger the other day, I was like, what is this sliding into DMs thing that I don't understand? And she was explaining, I said, oh, so you just sent them a message. Why? Like that, but that's sliding into a DM. I had no idea. I was like, there's no sliding, and it makes it sound like it's this big deal that you slid into, you sent them a message. I mean, right. But I think that part of the issue is that the rules of the game have changed, and I don't know how to help a young person, let alone my son, to know how to navigate it. I wouldn't even know. I know that when, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter, and I barely understand that. And I will say this, I have so many friends who are on the spectrum that I love and I cherish hearing from them, but it's almost when somebody messages me for the first time, without meeting them, I get a sense of if they're on the spectrum or not, because the conversation starts the same way. And it's different than how it is with my friends who are not on the spectrum. So if it's somebody who's on the spectrum, generally, not all the time, I will get a starter text for them that will say hi. And that's it. That's all that there is.
Right.
Whereas if it's somebody who is not on the spectrum, they'll say, hey, Shannon, how are you? There's this whole little,
right.
BS thing that happens in the beginning. And then they say, I need to talk to you for a minute. And often they'll refer to what it is that they need to talk about. But for my friends on the spectrum, it's so endearing, right? There's no BS. It's just hi. It's the opening of a conversation. But I have no idea what they're looking for.
Well, the nice thing, these dating apps, first of all, like if someone needs help doing it, they need to find often it's their sibling, maybe not their parent, right?
There we go.
Who knows better how to operate the technology. But a lot of those apps have openers for you.
Oh, really? See, I didn't know that.
They have some opening scripts that you can use. But I call this, when we're talking about having a conversation, putting some paint on the canvas. Because if you want to have a conversation with someone and you show them a blank canvas, it's not clear there's nothing for them to respond to.
Yes.
So you got to put something out there. Hey, I saw that you love, Star Wars. I'm totally into Star Wars too. What's your favorite movie, or which one do you like? And you start a conversation about something that you both like. There's something on the canvas, And so one of the things that most of my clientele will do if they're interacting just to make friends or to date people on the internet is they just respond positively to something in someone else's profile.
There you go. There you go.
You know, and it associates you with positive feelings then for that person. And of course, they have to refrain from saying anything that's potentially insulting, even if it's true. And sometimes folks on and off the spectrum have a hard time editing things that they feel are true. You know, like maybe it's true that I don't like the color blue, but maybe I don't say, hey, hated your blue top you're wearing today, right? It might be true, but I don't need to say that kind of thing. So we stick to just the, you know, the positive stuff in the beginning to make a good impression.
Are those kinds of things in your book, No More Victims, or does that focus more on the protecting yourself?
The dating stuff is more in the new social skill training book and in Preparing for Life. But certainly, like the most updated stuff is in the new social skill training book. You know, where to meet people, you know, how to make a good first impression, how to ask somebody out, like what do you say, and sort of then the rules, the do's and don'ts on a date, and then some rules and boundaries around physical intimacy. All of that stuff is in that social skill training book. No More Victims is really about protecting yourself from cyberbullying, number one, protecting yourself from sexual predators online, that's number two. And then number three, particularly for our adults, protecting ourselves from financial predators online, all the kind of scams that exist. And there's some good government websites that will tell you about the more frequent scams.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, who's most likely to be a victim of financial scams? Do you think? People on the spectrum, people not on the spectrum? Who's the most likely victim of a financial scammer?
I am going to guess that elderly people are the most likely.
So not necessarily, although that happens a lot. It is the most wealthy and most educated people that are the most likely victims.
Oh, that's
Why?
interesting.
Because the more educated you are and the more wealthy you are, the more you are involved in financial websites. The largest scammer, you know, of our time was Bernie Madoff. And who were his clients?
Yeah.
You know, they were the richest and wealthiest and most educated people. We're all
is the lesson, is the takeaway there that we should not feel bad if we get scammed because it's a thing that happens to people who are educated and wealthy, or is it that it could happen to anybody?
Well, both, right? I mean, we don't need to feel bad because you're not alone. Everybody is a potential victim. And we can arm ourselves by being aware of what the current scams are that are going on. If we have a hard time sort of judging, there's certain like rules that I have always, which are things like, you know, you never click on a link from an email that's been sent to you. So if my bank sends me an email, click on this link to put my information in, I don't do that. I go to the official website of the bank and I can put my information in. But a lot of emails that get sent to us are phishing expeditions. They're just trying to get your personal information. So there's certain rules. Never wire money unless you know have validated who the other person is on the other end. And this is just going to get worse with AI technology.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people can imitate your. Here's a common scam. A grandchild calls their grandmother saying that they're in jail. Don't tell my parents, but can you wire me money to get me out? And it sounds like their actual grandson or grandchild, but it's you know, AI generated voice. So wiring money you can't get back. Credit card you can get back. You have some protection. You're not going to be liable with credit card fraud, but you will be liable if you wire money, you can't get it back. So there's certain kinds of things that we need to be aware of that we write about in the book. But I also think it's one generalized thing people can do is always have a list of people you can trust. So when somebody asks you for information, when somebody asks you to do things, go to someone on that list of trusted people and say, hey, is this a good idea? For example, one of my clients, he was in his 40s, got the call that all of us have gotten. You owe taxes and you're going to go to jail unless you pay your taxes. Many of us have gotten that call. The IRS, by the way, will not call you. You will not get a phone call from the IRS. That's always a scam. You'll get an official letter, send it to an accountant, make sure they, validate that it's really from the IRS. But he got a call. He said, you have to go right now and wire money to us. Otherwise, there will be a warrant for your arrest. So he goes over to a local Walgreens store where they had a Western Union, and he was starting to wire money. Unfortunately, the manager there told him, hey, that's a scam. But that guy now has a list of people he trusts, including his brother. I'm on the list. At any time he's been asked for personal information or social security number or any financial information, he will ask me or he'll ask his brother, and then we can sort of advise him.
I love that, Dr. Baker, because I think, one of the things that we always struggled with is you want to make your child, your teen, your adult aware of the fact that there are scammers out there, but you also don't want to make them so paranoid that they can't move through relationships and be afraid that everybody is scamming them. So I love instead having, and we should all have this, a list of people that because I say to a friend, hey, or I will talk to a coworker and say, I got this message. Does anybody know anything about this? And somebody says, no, that's a scam. I go, okay, good. I don't walk into those situations with just my head, and so why should anybody? But I love giving them the very specific thing of, let's make a list of who are the people that you can go to, that you trust, that you can ask their opinion, because 2 heads or 3 heads or 4 heads are always going to be better than 1 head. So I absolutely love that.
And let's be clear. Being an independent adult doesn't mean being totally by yourself in an island. To me, independence means flexible dependence. We are social animals. We're embedded in a social culture. We all depend on each other. When you are not an independent person, you're a child, you depend on one person and one person only, and maybe it's one of your parents. But as we get older, we're able to and we theoretically become more independent. What we're really doing is we're dependent in a flexible way on many people. I don't really know anymore how to. I used to when I was a kid, but now I don't know how to do maintenance on my car. It's too complicated.
Yeah,
I have a mechanic
it's a
for
computer.
that. Yeah, and I dabbled in investments early on, but now I have a financial advisor because I didn't do so well.
Yeah.
So I have an advisor for that. I don't take care of my, physical health needs myself. I have a doctor who tells me what tests to get and what I have to do. I don't do my own if I had a cavity, I don't fill it myself. I go to a dentist. So I think that's what it means, is that it's okay to ask for help. The people in the highest office of the land do that. The president has a cabinet of advisors.
Yep.
So it's okay to ask for help. That's part of being independent.
There's a commercial on right now, and I have no idea what it's selling, but it's kind of cute and brings home this point. That ambulance people are pulling on a stretcher a man out of a house, and he says, "Oh, I guess I should never have tried to give myself my own appendectomy."
Yeah,
right. And then it's something about, you wouldn't try to do this so don't try to do this. I have no idea what it's selling. So in that respect, it's not a good commercial, but it goes right to the point here. Okay, and I want to reiterate that we are talking with Dr. Jed Baker. You guys can be sending in questions right now. The best way to send in a question if you're watching us live is on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. On any of those platforms, you guys are being awfully quiet. I know it's because you're listening. But on any of those platforms, you can write in a question right now. We're down to the last 15 minutes. So if you have a question that you want to write in, you pretty much have to do it right now. But we do have another question that came in last night. My 22-year-old son has anxiety, and I don't know how concerned to be. He manages to function through the anxiety, so sometimes I don't see it. But he tells me afterward. I have suggested that he go to a therapist. He went once, but they did an intake, and he said it was of no help, and he won't go back. I have tried to explain to him that an intake, what it is, and he's just done. How do you motivate that? He is not conserved, so I am not allowed to talk to his doctors or even make appointments. What do you recommend?
Did you say he's not concerned?
Conserved. So she doesn't, what that means to me is that they don't have conservatorship, which means he has autonomy over his medical things.
I understand. So there's some things I don't fully know or understand about it within the question.
Okay. And maybe they're watching, so go ahead and ask, and maybe they'll write in.
Yeah, just the issue of, like, anxiety can be a lot of things. So when we all have anxiety, by the way, it's a human condition. So I'm not sure how severe his anxiety is and what way it manifests and what he isn't able to do, what he or is avoiding or not avoiding, whether it's just anxiety, but he can sort of muddle through and function, or it interferes with his functioning, so he starts to avoid certain things. But the treatment for anxiety in general, depending on if you're avoiding something because of your anxiety, the treatment ultimately is gradual exposure, gradually facing the fear, and so you find out it's not something you actually have to be fearful of. Now, there's certain things you do have to be fearful of, like you don't want to be walking out into traffic. That's not anxiety, that's a true alarm. And so the nature of anxiety disorders is that these are false alarms, that your body is reacting with that fight, flight, or freeze response as if your life depends on it, when it's actually a false alarm. There really isn't a danger. And so the first part of treatment is education, that it is in fact a false alarm. And the only way you'll know it is if you gradually face that fear and you find out, okay, nothing bad happened. So how do you get people to gradually face their fear? One way is what's called cognitive behavior therapy, which is kind of using some logical and scientific part of your mind to override the sort of panic limbic system part of your brain. So I call those two parts of your brain Dr. Banner and the Incredible Hulk. So the Incredible Hulk is your limbic system, fight, flight, or freeze. You're panicking, you're running away, or you're raging with anger, either one. And then your forebrain, the Dr. Banner scientist part of your brain, is saying, wait, hold on. It's a slower part of your brain. It's not so automatic. It's a slower part that says, wait, maybe that's a false alarm. And we want that forebrain, Dr. Banner part of the brain, to ask two questions anytime there's anxiety. Number one, am I overestimating the probability of something bad happening? And number two, am I overestimating the severity? Like, how bad would it be if it did happen? And so these are just two questions that we want to sort of answer scientifically to help us maybe face that fear. After 9/11, I remember many years ago, I wouldn't get on a plane for a while, Shannon. It was a pretty scary moment. And but I began to look at the data, and what was the probability of being in a fatal plane crash? Well, if you fly the major airlines, this is not the case for Malaysian Air, which I won't fly, but for all the other airlines, pretty much the major ones, it's 1 in 19.6 million. So that probability mathematically is such that I'm not going to die on an airplane. That's not. I got 23andMe. I kind of know how I'm probably going to die, So it's not going to be on an airplane. And now the severity of a plane crash could be pretty severe, but the probability is very, very low. And so we ask these questions to help people have that internal battle with themselves to be able to, gradually face that fear. There are also other things we can do to turn down the volume on the anxiety. And so things like relaxation training and meditation. Physical exercise is really good. Aerobic exercise, data, the studies come one after another on how it can reduce anxiety for, for a certain window, a certain period of time, 3-4 hours, you get a good decrease in anxiety from exercise. Medication can be a tool, and it doesn't have to be forever. It can be something you take temporarily so you can face that fear. I had a young lady who wouldn't go to school all of last year, refused school. Well, absolutely, it was 2 years ago. And I ended up seeing her in December, that first year where she wasn't going to school. By the end of the year, it took really till May, we got her back to school. And then the next year she had the record for attendance. She never missed a day, even when she didn't feel great, but she just didn't want to miss a day. And the first time she had to go back, she had a panic. She had that moment. But we anticipated. We said, you're going to have an alarm reaction. It's a false alarm. What do you do? And she had a set of tools to distract herself, because she knew if she could wait 5 minutes when she was in school, that panic would pass. And it did. And then she ended up staying the whole day. And in terms of gradual exposure, what we said to her is, don't go the whole day. Just go for 5 minutes. Because now if you can go for 5 minutes, you might feel fine and stay the whole day, but just go for 5 minutes. And that idea that she just had to be there for 5 minutes was allowed her to face the fear. And then she ended up staying the whole day and never looked back. So that's just an example of sort of gradual exposure. And we did a lot of CBT work, cognitive behavior therapy. What's the probability of something bad happening in school? How bad would it be? Like there was once a lockdown drill at school, and that was part of her initial beginning of the phobia around a school. So what's the probability of there actually being an event like that? It was very low, right? Very low. The doors are locked. Severity would be low because it would be prevented. So there was a lot there that we could work on. How do you motivate somebody to want to do this? Well, the way I try to motivate all my clients is I talk about their abilities, their strengths. When that kid, 22-year-old, walks in the door for that intake for anxiety, you don't talk about, oh, your anxiety is really crippling and it's going to mess up your life. You talk about their strengths, their abilities, their talents, and all that he could do with his life. And we just don't want the anxiety to get in the way of that. And then we map out how we don't get rid of your anxiety, but we get to a point where we manage it so it won't be in the way of your strengths. And that's how we try to motivate people, by telling them about what's right about them, not what's wrong, but what's right.
Amazing. I've been saying this for, I don't know, a year, that I feel like as a world, not even as a nation, as a world, we have a lot of healing to do post-pandemic. And different people are on different schedules post-pandemic, because I have friends that live in Texas, and the lockdown lasted like 3 weeks, and then they were back to life as usual. And the concept of a mask is so far away for them, whereas, yesterday, for the first time, I walked into a store without a mask, and it was only because I forgot it. So I'm in a much different phase than even the people that are around me. But when I think about that, and I think about our kids, and how all kids on the spectrum, kids with ADHD, kids that don't have a diagnosis of anything, how difficult this process has been for them to, first be out of school and have to be learning in an entirely different format with teachers who did not know how to hack it. Like the kids, I think, could have, if we had just left it up to them, they could have figured it out and they would have been wonderful. But the teachers struggled. I have friends that are teachers, and man, they struggled. But now everybody's back in the classroom, and I keep hearing from teachers that it's a hot, hot mess, and that all of the kids have anxiety. And if all of the kids have anxiety, we already know that most of the kids with autism already had anxiety. I sort of feel like there needs to be this national healing that starts with our kids, that we give them this toolbox that you're talking about to be able to handle what's being thrown at them rapid fire. Are
Yeah,
you seeing more anxiety right now?
Sure. First of all, the rates of anxiety have always been really high. And on the autism spectrum, roughly 80% of people on the spectrum have a comorbid anxiety diagnosis.
Yeah.
There's some interesting research in schools. You can see some of the research on places like CASEL.org, CASEL.org, Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And it shows that if you pay attention to their social emotional learning of kids in school, their social emotional life, basically you do some interventions around managing emotions and getting along with other people, that their academic scores go up, not down. Now, often administrators are fearful of spending time on the emotional and social skill life of people in schools because we have this whole curriculum that we have to get to. We don't have time. We got to get through the reading and math. And if you pay attention to people's emotional states, if you introduce things like meditation, and calming techniques and conflict resolution, and dealing with teasing and compromising and cooperation. If you deal with skills like that and problem solving, and just the idea that all problems can be solved. That's one of my mantras, by the way. Maybe this is a good place to stop, actually, which is one of the mantras that I give all my clients and I live by is that all problems can be solved, or at least greatly reduced, if you can wait and talk to the right person. And that's just a critical bit of information to sort of live by, because it's what gives us the hope when we're in a bit of a crisis or having a problem, and allows us to regulate our feelings. See, hope that there's somebody out there who can help me. Hope. If I have a trust in another human being, that trust leads to hope. That hope leads to better self-control. And problem solving requires a level of trust in another human being that leads to hope and optimism that it can get better. That gives me enough emotional self-control that I can access my Dr. Banner brain and not just go into Hulk mode. And so if we can equip kids in school with that concept, whatever the problem is, we'll solve it. We can make it better. We may not fix it 100%, maybe we'll get it 70, 80% better, but we can absolutely do that. And that's been critical for so many of my kids who are overwhelmed with anxiety and overwhelmed on the other side of the coin with frustration and anger, right? Whatever it is, we can make it better. And I think if teachers and administrators attend to those issues, problem solving, conflict resolution, mindfulness, meditation, let me get into a state where I can access Dr. Banner brain again and solve problems, academic scores will go up.
Yeah.
That's what the data shows.
Well, let me just tell you, Dr. Baker, you did not disappoint. And I want to thank you. I hope we can do this again sometime and maybe give our audience a little bit more notice that you're going to be back doing this sometime. But I also want to take just
anytime, Shannon,
okay.
Anytime.
Well,
I'd love to be on your show.
We're going to make that happen again. I want to reiterate that right now, the 20th anniversary edition, which has got new information that's up to date and 20 years more experience behind it, of Dr. Baker. I was going to say Dr. Banner's book, but now she got me thinking about Dr. Banner.
It sort of is. It's the Dr. Banner part of my brain.
There we go. It's called Social Skills Training 20th Anniversary Edition for Children and Adolescents with Autism and Social Communication Differences. It's from Future Horizons. If you go to FH, that's F as in Frank, H as in Hope, or F as in Future and H as in Horizons.com. So FH, actually, I'm wrong. It's FHAutism.com.
That's right, FHAutism.com.
There it is, and Traven's got it on the
or Amazon too, both.
But Amazon, you can get it at Amazon and get it next day. Both are great. But if you go on Amazon, take a look at, or FHAutism.com, you will find the list of other books, and I guarantee you'll find at least one or two other books that you want to order too. They're great books. I'm a huge fan, always have been and always will be, and it's been such a pleasure to talk with you, Dr. Baker, and hear your wonderful wisdom. I'll be honest with you, I wish we lived in New Jersey.
Be careful for what you wish for.
Oh, I guess so.
No, I love New Jersey.
Well, but I mean,
I'm a New York
I
City
think a
boy.
lot of people are like, ooh, I'd like to have Dr. Baker and carry him around in my back pocket to help me with, because you're just a voice of reason. But you can get his books and carry those around with you, and you probably can get them digitally, I would imagine, and for real carry them around with you. You're amazing, and I thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Love your show. Love everything you're doing. Anytime, I'd be happy to come back.
All right, I'm going to
Thanks so
press you again and have you back. All right, you take care. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye. And the hour is over, so I'm going to let you guys go. Tomorrow, Stories from the Spectrum is back, and then I think we're replaying Let's Talk All the Things from last month on. Are we showing the Ask Dr. Doreen? I cannot remember. You gave me a thumbs up. I think it's Let's Talk All the Things. So that's what's happening on Friday. Then we're back here on Monday and have shows. Dr. 𝗃𝗓𝗂𝗧 is back next week, and we have 2 amazing guests on Wednesday. You're gonna love it, all right? So all of that is coming up. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.